Welcome to the last of this year's account management sessions. I'm Sarah Golding, CEO of CHI & Partners and Chair of the Client Services Group here at the IPA. It's nice to see some familiar faces, and for those of you who haven't been to one of these sessions before, they are meant to be quite informal, lots of questions please. And the intention is really just to inspire ourselves to be even better at what we do, and I think importantly to remind each other of the importance and value of the role of the account handler at today's modern agency. So this year, for those of you who haven't been, we've been really lucky to hear from some industry legends. We've heard from a whole host of industry account men, from James Murphy to Ian Pearman to Gail Galley to Tom Knox, all of whom have been more than happy to talk to us about themselves, about the role of the account man, and their view of what it takes to be a successful account man. But interestingly, we also asked the points of view of legends from other disciplines in terms of how they value the account man's role, helping them do the very best work within the agency. So we heard from John Burley, who's Executive Creative Director at the agency I work at, and we heard from Craig Ingalls, the Marketing Director of John Lewis. So today's guest speaker is an extremely fitting close to this year's series. Not only as one of the industry's leading planners and strategists can he give us his point of view, having partnered some of the very best account men in the business, he's also taken on the role of account man in the agencies he's either worked at or gone on to found. And believe you me, he's done a much better job than a lot of today's CEOs. Laurence Green needs absolutely no introduction. He's co-founded 2 agency startups, Fallon London, Agency of the Year twice, and more recently 101. He's synonymous with great work, whether that be Sony Balls, Skoda, or a certain drumming gorilla. I was lucky enough to work with him back in the day at Low Howard Spink, and even though I worked with him for a very short period of time, I learnt more from Laurence than I did from anyone else in the agency, and I stayed there for another 8 years. So please sit forward, take note, take this opportunity to ask Laurence lots of questions. You'll learn more from him than you will from any other course you go on next year. Laurence.
Blimey. Never been described as a legend before. That's why they wanted to put that country and western mic on me. Aaron, can you hear me without a mic? Then we're going to be fine. Thank you, Sarah. I've got some notes, which I'll broadly speak to. I, like you, am probably so glad that networking bit is over. I quite like it, but it's the title that does me in. 20 minutes of networking, it just strikes fear in me. I don't know, maybe we called it something different. We called it war stories or petty one-upmanship or whatever is actually happening in that room. It would be more attractive, but I stayed in here with Sarah. So I don't really do networking, and I try not to do PowerPoint. So those of you who like PowerPoint, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer for your daily fix. Yeah, that's another presentation, not done on PowerPoint. Well done, men, for your moustaches. I made the mistake recently of congratulating someone at a client company, not in the fashionable West End of London, on his participation in the Movember charity event, and he looked at me utterly blankly, and I realised that the moustache was for life, not just for Christmas. And apologies, therefore, if some of you normally sport absurd facial hair. Right. The camera is on, but I'm told we can edit stuff out. Yeah. So I'm going to talk for, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes, maybe longer. I'm a bit like a creative with a script. I'm staring at it going, yeah, that'll work in 30. And it's either a 10 or a short film. But it's mainly here as a prompt and a platform for questions and discussion, because I'd rather do that, and I suspect you would too. But I do have a point of view on account management. What I don't have is what was trailed on the IPA's website, which I read to my horror yesterday in an attempt to prepare something that was as advertised. I think it still says, over breakfast, was a good start, Laurence will share his personal perspective on account planning, which I don't intend to do unless there's a real clamour for it, or you feel missold at the end of the event, and how his personal perspective on account planning ties in with the challenges and opportunities facing the account management industry. Look at you. I had no idea that account management was an industry. I know you're prone to occasional self-aggrandizement, but that was pretty impressive. I can only presume that it's because Christmas is coming and you're going to go to some parties with, parents, friends, and you need to say, yes, I'm working in industry. Doing very well. So I'm not going to talk about you guys as an industry. I will talk about you guys and it as a discipline. I'll tell you a bit about what we're doing at 101, not just to blow smoke up our corporate arse, but because I think actions are more important than theory. I'm quite unusual for a planner in believing that to be the case. And we're doing a few things that I think underscore some of the points I want to make. So if I talk about my new thing, it's in the spirit of helping to make a general point. What are my credentials for this? Long service, largely, but long service alongside some great account people. Genuinely people without whom the work that I get my name attached to wouldn't have happened. We might have had some of the ideas, the car made out of cake, the drumming gorilla, balls bouncing down a hill in San Francisco, but by and large they wouldn't have happened without people like you. And in that massive difference between notions, which are 10 a penny and which there'll be plenty of in your day job today, this week, and pulling those things off, that's the gap that account management fills, and only account management fills. And I've seen that being done brilliantly at AMV, where I started, so I was very lucky. It was a relatively small agency in the 1980s. But I worked with M, who was Peter Mead, very brilliant old school account man. The V, Adrian Vickers, very different sort of account guy, equally brilliant. With Jeremy Miles, who was then head of account management. Helen Calcraft was my peer. Miles and Calcraft went on to do their agency, which is now Dare. I worked with Sarah at Lowe's and Frank Lowe. Yeah, an extraordinary, charismatic, one in a million account guy. I started Fallon with two very different, very brilliant people. Robert Senior, who runs Saatchi across EMEA, Michael Wall, now running Lowe's worldwide. We hired a chap called Chris Hurst, who some of you may work for, may know, now running Grey. Karina Wilshire, now running Anomaly in New York. Magnus Jabba, running Saatchi in the UK. Chris Willingham, still at Fallon, but the man with balls and gorilla on his CV as an account man. So I've seen what you do done really well. I've also seen it done really badly. And I was reflecting just this morning, and forgive me, because this really dates me and Sarah, so that's fine. We once found our then account director on the creative department late at night, maybe even early one morning, Tipexing a script out and retyping a bit of the script because he couldn't get the creatives to change their mind, and decided that he'd sneak in, these are in the days of typewriters and Tipex, and change it for presentation to client. A lovely chap, but I suggest a counterproductive move on his part, as it proved. And as Sarah said, I've done your job as well, so I've seen it done brilliantly, I've seen it done badly, and I've also had a go myself. To my great shame, because I think it's ended up in Robert's presentation on IPA 4 or something, he once got back from holiday and I just said to him, I would rather eat shit than do your job. which I think is the title of his presentation to people like you on IPA 4. So I've seen it done well, I've seen it done badly, and I don't mind admitting people like me actually need people like you, and you need to remember that. By people like me, I mean planners, creative people, the other types that make up the crazy mix of people in an agency. I don't know if any of you either heard of or done the Belbin team role thing. Have any of you come across that? Oh, you should do, it's good. Meredith Belbin, great name, a bloke, I think, created a kind of psychological framework for how people work in teams. All teams, football teams, agency teams, other teams. And basically worked out that there are essentially 8 or 9 different types. The 9th is a new one, a specialist. But in any team, there should be 8 different types. It doesn't matter which one you are. What matters is that you know what sort of player you are and that your captain or your manager knows the strengths and weaknesses of people around them. So without dwelling on it, some of them are really obvious. So there's a team type. There's a team worker. That's pretty obvious. Someone who pulls everyone together and makes things happen. There's an implementer, for example. Some of them are a bit weirder. There's a team type called plant, which is classic creative. Just someone who keeps coming up with stuff, can't help themselves. There's a monitor evaluator, which sounds like a lizard with a clipboard, but is someone who's always looking at stuff, evaluating stuff, weighing stuff up. I'm a resource investigator, and I'm going to talk to you about the good things about me as a result and the bad things. I'm extrovert, enthusiastic, and communicative. I explore opportunities and I develop contacts, albeit not networking. But I have a weakness. This is what it tells you in a little computer printout. I can be over-optimistic. Yes. If you've ever driven with me, that is the case. And I can lose interest once initial enthusiasm has passed. Yes, true. And I score worst of all. I'm literally like bottom decile or something against someone called the completer finisher. The completer finisher is someone who is painstaking, conscientious, and anxious. Someone who searches out errors and omissions, and this bit's in bold, someone who delivers on time. That's what I'm shit at. But I'm good at some other stuff. And as a sidebar, I would encourage you to, you don't have to do the Belbin thing. I think you can spend £100 online and do it if you want to get a boss to fund it in the interest of self-awareness. I suppose the less scientific way of doing it would just be to think about yourself when you're happy, what you do well, what other people say you do well. Think about other people in your team, what they're good at, and just turn what you instinctively know into something more concrete about yourself or about your team. The point is there are different types of people in agencies. You know that superficially, it's actually true scientifically as well. And the more you understand the strengths and weaknesses of different personality types, the more precious you'll realise you are. And the more you will understand your colleagues, rather than just getting angry with them and wondering why you have to chase planners for stuff. You're a want in my book, but candidly, you're also a need in my book. I need people like you to help me be good at what I do. But I do know it's quite tough doing what you do. Remember, I'm the man who'd rather eat shit. And I know it's tough at the moment. I mean, I've sidestepped a bit of the toughness for a new type of toughness because we started a business in January of this year. And in a way, we're in our own brilliant little bubble. Our staff numbers are up 500% this year. Our year-on-year income is up infinity%. And we're pretty confident and optimistic about our future because when you're tiny, what you do and whether you work well as a team and whether you find the right opportunities and partner up with the right people is much more important than what the market is doing or whether, whether George Osborne's autumn statement is good or bad for our world. I hope you don't get any questions about that. I said I'd answer anything, but not about that. We're independent too, so we're not caught, like I suspect some of you are, between clients driving down margins and budgets and fees on the one hand, and your groups and owners clamouring for the same numbers, the same margin, because they've promised the city. So we're in a little bubble, but we do know what's going on around us. We know that budgets are down. We know that procurement keeps coming back for more, and how that kind of saps the spirit as much as driving money down. We know there's not much good work out there. Clients always get blamed for that, but I think agencies aren't sticking their head out much anymore. We know that integration is more important than ever, but harder than ever to do. That's even true, by the way, within the one-stop shops and the big groups. I had sight of something I shouldn't have seen. This might have to be edited out, although I'll keep the group private. One of the bigger groups did a review of the component parts of the organisation, separate research study. How can we get everyone to work better together? And the top line of the research debrief says the only thing that unites the component parts of your group is a mutual suspicion of one another. Quite scary, but I felt also true and competitive, so I use it. So I know it's hard out there, and I know in the midst of all the turmoil is people like you explaining to your bosses that your numbers won't be as good as last year, trying to keep creative spirits up, trying to pull these dysfunctional teams together, going home late, getting in early, wondering whether it's all worthwhile and whether you should do something else. So I think that's a truth, but I think there's another truth as well. I think the other truth is that good agencies who turn their principles into good behaviours are still good places to work and still make plenty of money. Even campaigns, I can't remember what we call it, the Willett Kingston Smith survey last week proved that pretty much the agencies that you and I would rate most are the ones that make money, charge more, make money. So this is still a good business for us all. I actually think there's quite a lot of good work out there as well. Sarah's done some of it. I don't know what you guys like, but I think there's some there's great stuff at both ends. There's great old-fashioned brand storytelling still. I'm trying not to say John Lewis, but I think the Google Chrome stuff this year was really good, especially as a dad. I think the Volkswagen Darth Vader stuff is great. I think Cravendale Thumbs is great. And then I think there's more visceral stuff, typically digital, which is equally great. And maybe sometime soon we'll have ideas that are actually great in terms of both old school advertising and new school digital. I think that Mercedes thing at the moment comes quite close, actually. I don't know whether people have seen it or like it, but it gets quite close, I think, to a sweet spot for ideas in the future. So I think there's some good work out there. And I think the thing always to remember as well is that good work is never far away. You know, someone in this room is going to do something great in the next few months. On what, I don't know. But a great brief, a great idea, a lucky bounce, an ounce of self-belief, and one of the things you're working on can turn into something amazing. And life can take a turn for the better, for the brand or for you guys. So I think you can still make money and still make great work, and I think great work makes more difference than ever before. Witness something like John Lewis, the way that lands in popular culture rather than just on the advertising screens. So I think you can also hold your head high that you work in a really important business, because strong brands are more important than ever. And in aspiring to do great work, which I suppose, or presume most of you want to do, that you know that there are greater rewards there. I think, tracking back 20 years, we could never be entirely certain when we worked at someone like Lowe's that what we were doing was actually, for all the sheer pain of trying to do the very greatest work you could do and having to Tipex scripts because creatives wouldn't change them, you could never be entirely sure that what you were doing was making a massive difference compared to people who are just cranking work out down the road. I think it's more obvious today than ever, actually, that when people get something very right, it makes a massive difference to business. So I think those are reasons to be cheerful. And I think account management, if we must call it that, I suspect we must, still lies absolutely at the centre of all of that. I was going to say despite, but I think it's actually because of all the other people who lay claim to being the fulcrum. So there was a point a few years ago where digital agencies and digital was the fulcrum, and that's partly true, but I think was over-claimed at the time. I think media agencies, through command of budget and budget decisions, claim to be the centrepiece. Planners sometimes claim to be the new kind of middlemen, the new orchestrators of stuff. I don't believe any of their claims. I think they're all, of course, brilliant contributors to stuff. But I think you guys are still the people who create the right conditions, both within your companies and your client's company, for great ideas to happen. And great ideas are what makes the most difference in the end, regardless of budget, regardless of medium. I still think you're the people we look to conduct us all in this orchestra. It is getting bigger, it is getting harder, but we're still looking to you guys to do it. And you're still the people who are most likely to be the leaders of tomorrow. You know, I've tracked through the names earlier just to let you know where people end up. And if you're ambitious for leadership, then what you're doing is the right path. There isn't a better preparation for general management than running an account. And more sort of prosaically, you're still the people that people like me and your colleagues look to when energy is low, when someone needs to lead you over a hump, when people need a decision to be made rather than just lots of chat, and when wrists need slapping or when we need more money. All those boring things, we look to you guys to do it because you're leaders. We should be leaders rather than managers. And as I reflected on all of that, I realised that you're basically our parents. We never say thank you to you for what you do, but deep down we know we either wouldn't be here or couldn't flourish without the work people like you do. I genuinely mean that, so thank you. Thank you, Aaron, if I never said thank you. But, and there is a but. In fact, I've got a few buts if I can be critical for a moment. I think there's some behaviours in account management that don't help your cause. I mean, clearly everyone in this room is not guilty of them, but there are others out there who sometimes either bring your discipline into disrepute or worse, just make it weak. And I'm going to touch on a few of those areas for improvement, let's call them. And by the way, this isn't necessarily a personal point of view. It's nothing beyond the kind of accumulated wisdom. So first of all, I think the days of really combative account management are drawing to a long overdue end. There are people who think the client is the enemy. And I think if you find yourself in that space mentally, you're in a bad place as a leader of agency efforts against a brand. Stand down, from that particular account if you think they're the enemy, and your only kind of professional satisfaction is beating them, because that's not how it's supposed to be. So the obvious corollary of that is collaborate, get under their skin, understand them. One test is if you find yourself selling work to a client rather than helping them buy it. Beware. You should have done all the groundwork in terms of preparing them for great ideas a long time previously. Marketing and selling, very, very different things. Know the difference in order to do your job, but know the difference in the way you go about your job as well. Help people to buy stuff rather than sell it to them. They'll thank you for that. They won't always thank you if you sell them something that they didn't need or didn't ask for. I'd go further than that, actually. I'd really try and understand your client's business better. I don't think you can be their agent. I know I'm being a bit Mad Men, but I don't think you can be their agent in the modern world of idea creation and marketing if you don't understand their business. And I'm always really impressed when I see people going off and doing crash course MBAs or picking up an FT or whatever of the myriad ways in which you can understand your client's business better, taking them to one side and asking for the presentation on how they make money, swapping jobs for a week or a month or longer, working client side like some of you will have done, I think is a massive advantage if you're trying to be a responsible agent for them. And I also think it's where you can find some, I don't want to call it intellectual pride, but well, let's settle for that. Intellectual pride in what you do. So much of what you do is sort of viscerally managing teams, being emotionally intelligent, driving stuff through, making stuff happen, that I think I've observed or I've heard some account people say, my brain, there are bits of my brain that are just atrophying and I want to be tested and pushed again. And I think understanding your client's business is the most obvious and the most valuable way you can do that. I said earlier, I grew up at AMV and we, as in the planners, were put in offices, remember those, with account directors, just like art directors and copywriters sat together in an office. And although job titles have changed since then, and although office design has also changed, I think it's still a brilliant buddy system to have a planner who's responsible-ish for the consumer, an account director who genuinely understand what makes the client's business work, and the two of them caring and loving and nurturing a brand together, I think is still the smartest possible way to create the right platform for creative people to do their crazy skating shit on top of it. So I think the thing you can do is really understand clients' business. And we used to do scary things at Lowe's, just doing basic business stuff about revenues and profits and balance sheets and no account guys that had a fucking clue about any of it. We tried to help, obviously, and I would encourage you to know your way around, not necessarily a balance sheet, definitely the top line of a P&L, definitely your company P&L. If you haven't talked to your finance director about how you make money and how you can help, I would do that. None of them are going to say, what the fuck are you asking me about my business for, you idiot? Go back and chase stuff. They will be delighted. And your FD will be delighted that you're asking him how you make money. So, if you choose to, or if you feel your brain is atrophying, find out as much as you can about their business. I suspect you're all better at this, but I think you need to be perpetually curious about the way in which brands can be built these days and the way in which ideas can get distributed. As you do that, try and treat or think of your client's money as if it was your own. I think one of the great sadnesses about media being hived off from creative, and I suspect some of you come from either side of the divide, but from a creative agency point of view, is we've kind of forgotten what money looks like and how much money we're spending on our client's behalf. I always thought the best thing to do would be for a client to bring a briefcase in, at the beginning of each financial year and go, there it is, there's all our money. It's very important to us, it's all our shareholders' money. Turn it into more money, please. Just to make people feel viscerally responsible, have the briefcase chained to your desk at all times, only letting out the cash when you properly believe there's a good idea and you're going to get more money back. Quite a lot more money back, actually, because of the revenue profit thing that Sarah noted down 15, 20 years ago. So, client stuff, curiosity about the world, a respect for money, and then there's some personal stuff. And it's interesting to me, I talk to a few clients, partly because I'm working with some, and with some who've joined 101. And their biggest disappointment, of course, because it's the biggest disappointment in life, is when they feel like they're being lied to. Or even just being told an untruth. I can't exaggerate enough how much you lose if you tell even a little white lie that gets found out. You have to build a deep well of trust with these people. You know, you're going to send buckets down into that well to ask them to do things like a 90-second commercial with a gorilla playing the drums. And the way you fill up the well is with trusted advice and counsel. So even when a lie might suit you in the short term, you might get away with it, try not to, because it's absolutely debilitating. So some moral stuff, some intellectual stuff, and then just a check, I suppose, especially as you guys transition, if I may dare to say so, from managers into leaders. I think I would try and recognise what leadership looks like versus management. And one of the most basic tests is, are people following me? That's the test of leadership. Are people marching to my beat? Are they pretty much doing what I want? Do they look to me for decisions, for clarity about where we're going? Or am I just running behind them, making sure it's all fine and just about get to the meeting? That's management, yeah? Leadership is something different. Leadership is when you know people are looking at you and following you, almost regardless of what you ask them to do. Almost. And I think you should take succour, because leadership's hard, I think, hard to do, hard to feel like you're a leader. Other people are leaders, I'm not a leader. But I suspect most of you in this room are leaders. That's why you volunteered for duty in your particular discipline. And I think the thing to remember is that people, especially creative people, hate being managed, and they love being led. They love being led. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous about being a leader and stepping one step forward and going, follow me, this is what I think we should do. Okay, I've heard it all, this is where we're going. Remember that people want you to do that. They won't say, oh, I'm not a wanker. I wanted to be the leader. We don't want to be the leaders. We want you to be the leaders. So, a wrap-up of sorts, and then I'll tell you very briefly what we're doing. I think you've got to be collaborative, not combative. I think you have got to single-mindedly work with your client on their brand's behalf, because your fortunes follow their fortunes. There isn't let's put the agency's fortunes first, and then maybe the rest will follow. It doesn't work that way around. You put the brand and your client first, and good things happen to you as a result. I would try and grow your commercial acumen if you don't feel confident already. I would lean into strategy rather than away from it. I think one of the sad things, again, I'm an old fart, so I'm allowed to compare and contrast with the good old days. I think in the good old days, account men and planners spent more time together writing strategy, writing briefs. And I think it's become the domain of the planner, and the bad planners erect big walls as well. This is my brief, this is the bit I do. I think that's really bad. I think you should try and help them. It'll make it better. Tell the truth, and remember, stroke dare to lead people around you. And I know that's all easy to say, and I know it's harder to do. I'm going to touch really briefly on what we're up to, only because I think it turns some of that stuff into action and goes beyond theory. So we are trying to do something a little different. We call ourselves a free-range creative company, as I noticed that Dare now do as well. Ouch. That language isn't important, except that it's a constant reminder to us and to our clients that we're looking for ideas of any type, and we're looking for any corner of a business that imagination might influence or might gain leverage in, rather than being an ad agency or a digital agency. We talk about ourselves in our creds, I think maybe even on our website. We talk about being fellow brand managers, and we mean it. And I think good people in our business have always cared personally, deeply personally, about the work they do and the brands they're working on, not just the company they work for and get paid by. And we've got a few behaviours that cement that, rather than that just being hollow words. So we've got 10 paying clients, and on all of them, bar one in progress, we have firstly a very aggressive success-fail remuneration plan. So we stand to lose because there's no, you can't have a one-way bet. And we also have an appraisal system that is almost entirely hitched to the client's own appraisal on their side. So if the client brand team is appraised on certain KPIs or sales or performance, we sit absolutely alongside theirs. One team, one set of performance metrics, rather than metrics being about quality of service, speed of response, that sort of stuff. So we're very much lined up against the brand owner. We try to, and we are getting involved a lot earlier than most of our peers do, which is why you haven't seen us on many pitch lists. And we're trying to do, and already have done, work across the broadest canvas possible. So we've done some comms, which is nice. We've done some content, which is good. And we've done some products. And they're all on our website, rather than me doing some crappy creds. We're also challenging production practice as we go. And I think that's the last remaining kind of legacy item for agencies to figure. I don't know whether you guys feel that, but I think production monies in our world are way out of kilter with production monies in other worlds. And I think if you're a responsible advisor to your client, and remember, they gave you the briefcase full of the cash and said spend it wisely, I think you have to challenge some of that stuff. Not necessarily to get work made cheaper, but definitely to get more work done for the same price. And I mention all of those just because those things, those instincts, start to reframe account management and actually rename account management as well. So everyone at 101 is an account man of sorts, because you have to be in a startup. Everyone's going to answer the phone. Everyone's got to run around, look around the corner, be client serving, clean up reception when someone's coming in, all that stuff. But we call the people who do what you do brand leaders rather than account men. To force them, I suppose, and to force us to line up squarely with the brand's agenda rather than some bogus kind of account agenda, on the basis that that will take us to the right answers and will reward us by building a brand. So brand leaders rather than account men. I think probably an imperfect title, and maybe even just kind of window dressing. I hope not, because it's there to call out the role of people like you in our organisation as fellow brandsmiths, people who corral others around a brand's agenda, people who are constantly thinking of ways in which the brand and the business can be built, rather than how the account can run better, or how you can win more for the account from other people who have the account at other agencies. I don't think that's particularly helpful behaviour. Those brand leaders are supported by project managers. And those project managers love, excel at, and are rewarded by doing project management. Just that, nothing more. They don't even want to be brand leaders. So we have brand leaders and project managers. Two of them, we've only got three, two of them come from client side and one from agency side. And I suspect there's a lesson in there. I can't work out quite what it is, but I think your peers, client side, are more aware of the briefcase of cash than you are, do understand the whole sweep of ways in which a business or a brand can get built. And I'd encourage you to emulate them and envy them that a bit. There's the flip side of all the things they envy you for. So I don't know whether we're right or wrong to have rebadged account management. And my point isn't that we don't have it. We call it something different to force it to do something different. My point is, whatever it's called, the function is vital, whether it's unsung or not. And I think the world we live in, with more complexity than ever and less cash than ever, makes it more important, not less important. I think if I had written PowerPoint, my slides would have been as follows. Slide 1, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I think, is that who English graduates? Is that Tale of Two Cities? Something like that. It's Dickens, definitely, isn't it? Because I think these are the best of times and the worst of times. And I think smart people will find themselves staring at, being buoyed by the best of times bit, not worrying about the worst of times bit. It is quite gloomy out there. It ain't going to get better for the next couple of years. But beneath all the economic doom and gloom, amazing things are happening in our industry in terms of what you can do technically, what you can do digitally, the rewards for ideas that run into popular culture rather than just stay in their little silos. My second slide would have been my last slide. Maybe I should have done it, but it would have been an awful lot of work for the IPA just to get two PowerPoint slides up. Is not Dickens, it's a permutation of Dickens. It would have just said, it was the best of jobs, it was the worst of jobs, because I think your job is both. Really hard, sometimes incredibly unfulfilling, I suspect, but also incredibly important and I think admirable. So best of times, worst of times, best of jobs, worst of jobs. Good leaders always find themselves to the positive and energising end of that shitty stick. They always remember that there are good times, even within the bad times, know why, can articulate why, can be excited by that. And I suspect that's why and where you'll find your kind of personal sustenance as well, remembering what's making these times in our industry great, because there'll be further recessions down the track. And again, one of the few good things about being 45 is I've seen a few and they pass. So stare at the good times, all the change, all the new interesting shit you can do, rather than just, when we started, shoot with a different director, try radio. Those are the exciting strategic possibilities 20 years ago. Remember that these are good times, change is good, possibilities are amazing. A commercial imperative sharpens thinking rather than dumbing it down. And stare at the things that make your job great. One of the best of jobs, not the worst of jobs. Remind yourself that you are being quietly heroic, organising your teams to deliver great work. Remember you are being trained, even though it might not feel like you are, in general management, which others aren't. And you will be, if you choose to be, the leaders of the future. Stare at the best of times and the best of jobs bit of my two PowerPoint charts, and you'll flourish, I suspect. So will your agencies and our industry, and so most importantly will people like me. Thank you very much.
Questions for Laurence, please? For someone to use it. You've got to use it.
Mind your moustache.
You talked about the importance of helping your clients buy work rather than actually selling it. I'm a car accountant, and often the client's always about the money shot of the car, so the shiny car looking sexy. So it's something like Skoda cake, and there's no actually the full car in the ad.
Yep.
How did you manage to help them buy that?
Well, I think we probably helped them buy it years before we presented that script. So we picked up that business when Skoda was still an absolute badge of shame for drivers. In fact, I don't know if any of you have heard the truthful anecdote. We were briefed on that in 1999, I think. And the client, a very lovely chap called Chris Hawken, came in, went through all the PowerPoint, and in the end just said, "You've got to help us. We've got children crying in our showrooms." What the fuck? He said, "We've got children bursting into tears when they realise Dad is serious about buying a Skoda, and they might be picked up from school." You worked on it, Aaron, didn't you? Yeah. They might be picked up from school or from a party in a Skoda. Yeah. So anyway, brilliant brief, because that was amazingly insightful, accidentally, about the fact that this was a social problem, not a product problem. And that anecdote makes more sense to people of my generation, because I mean, Skodas did. They were always on the front page of the Sun because people's steering wheels were coming off on the motorway and stuff. That's what happens when you build cars under monopoly conditions in Eastern Europe. Sorry. So I suspect we built up massive banks of trust by relaunching the brand years previously, ironically with lots of lovely car shots, because the whole point was, you think these are shit. Actually, they're quite beautiful. So the guys who shot some of the first Skoda print are actually doing our French connection work now. They were fashion photographers, and they shot the car looking amazing, just making people go, oh, maybe I was wrong. So part of the answer is years of bank of trust, because Skoda Cake probably came 7 years, maybe 8 years after that. Partly please, please, pretty please begging along the way. I'm pretty sure we shot a kind of you'll know the terminology, a 3/4 shot, whatever it is, of the actual car at the end. I don't think we ever cut the commercial to that, because the client in the end understood that the idea was genuinely more powerful than the reality, which I think is true in lots of ways. You know, we don't know what's in the kids' box in the John Lewis ad. There is good clients do understand that mystery and magic are additive, and don't let daylight in on magic by suddenly cutting to the actual car or showing what's in the box. So I think a mix of bank of trust and then just a kind of fairly dogged belief that this was the right way to do it, and this would leave people thinking most highly of the brand and most inclined to find out more.
I've got the mic.
Oh, wow.
You were speaking about the...
Sorry, speak up. It's a joke. It's a joke. You're fine. You're fine.
So you're saying, you're speaking about the importance of making sure your account is fully aligned with the brand.
Yes.
But whilst doing that, how do you maintain the identity of the account, of the agency between the accounts?
I think that's a really good question. Damn. I think businesses like ours have pretty strong identities anyway, actually, because I think we're fairly small, even big ones. I mean, I suspect the biggest company anyone works with has got, 200 people in it, 300 people maybe tops. So I think we're bad as an industry, the advertising industry, not the account management industry, at looking outside ourselves. We are a selection of very small, quite potent cultures, full of people, often led by either the first generation founders or some pretty impressive characters. So I actually think agencies have strong cultures themselves. I think you're right that the extreme version of what I've described could create 6-10 fiefdoms that don't have tissue fit. I suppose one of the things you have to make sure is just that people are circling round them. I think the thing you describe takes hold when people are allowed to create their own fiefdom, put big walls up, keep the team the same because everyone likes Emma, you know, she must never come off the business. So I think so long as you're populating it with the right people, so long as your company has a kind of culture and a focus and a mission, then I think you're probably okay.
And would be maybe not being part of a network help that? Because you have maybe a stronger identity in itself. You don't have to separate yourself from the other agencies in the network. Probably.
I don't know. I mean, I think there are some networked agencies that have very strong cultures. I think Wyden's has got an amazingly strong culture. I think BBH has got an amazingly strong culture. I think some independents or some one-stop shops have less strong culture. So I'm not sure it's pure, but I think you're definitely right that a potential downside to me saying be brand servants rather than a gang of account handlers is that you might create fiefdoms. So I think that's good pushback.
Hi there. I just want to ask, we're talking about recession and hard financial times. That tends to mean that clients have got a lot of pressure from above to spend wisely, which tends to make them more cautious. And generally, my feeling is that the brands, when they're braver and they're able to take risks, Gorilla, I imagine, even Meerkat, was probably a risk to be taken there. It's harder to, I guess, sway them to their gamble. What would your advice be there in terms of taking on that journey?
I think, I'll tell you what I see what I see is that people go with that force and teach either the client organisation or more often help the client teach the rest of his or her organisation what spending well looks like. Now that can take months and years, but one of my partners, Phil Rumble, was the old Cadbury marketing director, and he was incredibly hard working, both when he was a client and now, to help advise people. Respect that rather than moan about it and say, you need to, this is precisely the time when we need to be brave. Well, that's just words. Actually understand and investigate what spending well looks like. Look at, this place is helpful. Look at IPA effectiveness awards. Look at how important emotion is in terms of brand success and sales success. Look at data about time lengths. Understand what digital can do separately or better in concert with it. I think you've got to create almost kind of intellectual capital about spending well and being trusted to advise people to spend well. And you can't do that and shouldn't do that around a piece of work, because that's problematic and looks self-serving. You're trying to get something over the line. But I think if you treat it as part of your kind of 52-week-a-year duty to help your client understand what spending well looks like, let's look at successful case histories in your category, look at successful case histories beyond, get some speakers to come in and talk to the department, especially help your client to help make that case beyond. Because it's not normally marketing directors who go, now is the time to batten down the hatches and do shit stuff that no one knows who it's from and no one remembers it, no one talks about it. If marketing directors are talking like that, it's because someone upstairs is in their ear. So I think the thing you can do is help them be advocates of what spending well looks like.
Hi, Laurence.
How you doing?
So obviously in terms of for Rumble and the client side of things, your agency model's built on that closeness to the client, which is brilliant in many ways. It's quite interesting, in terms of agency or going client side, it happens a bit, and clients on the agency side less so. What would be the observations of your clients in your agency about the craziness of the agency world and how it's difficult, and observations on clients on the other side, and what would be your observations about some of the things that the client guys need to learn to do better?
Great question, partly because I think I know the answer. No, because I think it's really interesting how few people do shuttle to and fro, but how most of them flourish. So I think David Patton has done an amazing job at Grey. He was the old Sony client of ours. So I'm all for it. Sort of lower borders between the two. I think what I've seen, which is why I think I know the answer to your question, is really interesting actually. What clients are incredibly good at, if I can badge them all as clients, is editing and selecting and bringing strategic powers to bear at briefing, and then at the end of a process. Thank you for all those ideas. We're going with this one because we think it's right. What they're less used to is the crazy bit in between, the blind alleys, the ideas that are half-baked, where you go, well, that bit's quite interesting, but I'm not sure. The kind of beautiful chaos that we all take for granted is something that they go, fuck, I never knew it was like that, Because even a tissue meeting, which is about as informal as our creative presentations go, is quite a managed, manicured meeting. Compared to the daily chaos of having an idea. So I think they've, if I speak for them, certainly at our place, they're surprised to see just all that stuff and the way you have to drag bits and pieces together from different places to create an idea and let some stuff flow to the bottom and some stuff flow to the top. And their instinct is to select and edit, whereas I think the thing that account people are trained to do in agencies is to build and nourish and nurture, which is something we kind of take for granted actually, but it's amazing. It's an amazing skill to have, to be able to do proper idea building rather than idea selection. So I think they're really good at idea selection, better than we are actually in terms of saying that's the one. They're less good or need to learn idea building, which is I think what we instinctively do.
Why does I feel a bit of a lamb?
We'll put different questions in for the film to make me look really stupid.
We talk a lot about putting clients and brand first.
Yeah.
And also leading creatives. It's quite hard sometimes to get them to see the client point of view and the brand as a big picture. How do you advise managing sort of that problem where the creatives really desperately want you to keep an idea, but the client's like wait. I know you talk about trust and the long term, but it's just kind of for those new ones.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to say that again then. Although, the best creative people want to solve the problem. I'm really lucky. I've worked with Richard Flintham for 11 years at Fallon and now 10 months at 101. And all he ever cares about is the brand and what it feels like and what success looks like. So I think if you hit that problem, and I'm going to assume that you're well informed about what the brand needs, you may have a problem with that particular team. You may have a problem with creative culture more generally, that it's sitting in its little mollycoddled, dare I say it, self-serving world, rather than being properly client-led. Because there's no disgrace in creatives being client-led. That's the weird thing about where we've ended up in some ways, that they've become distant from the problems. The really good ones basically want to see the problem. So I think if you get stuck, you should listen to them always, because it may be that the way they see the idea rather than the way you're seeing it, the way the client's seeing it, is actually really helpful. And it may be that they're saying, yeah, but the bigger objective is blah, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. So I would always hear them out rather than doing oh, fucking hell, you guys, when will you learn? But I suspect in the end, you're at a bit of a dead end, probably need to fold, probably need to find ways, if they're your team for the future, of lining them up more with what the client's trying to do. They don't have to go to a presentation about the brand plans. They might like to go to the factory. Rich is a factory today. I think sorry, that sounds really patronising, but he wants to see the place and how it works and how they make things, and it gives him a visceral understanding that there are people on that line whose jobs rely on us building the brand in the right way. So send them to the factory.
More questions? I have 2 more questions.
Hi, Laurence.
Hello, how you doing?
Very well. I work in a pretty small agency, and I'm busy trying to hire at the moment and build a department. And one of the things I'm finding a bit harder to do, I came from JOT where it was quite classic grad scheme, you do contact boards, sort of do deals and details, look after finance. And in many ways I'm sort of shifting my mindset away from hiring people who are good at that and trying to find people who've got an attitude about risk-taking, entrepreneurism, and ballsiness and permission to fail and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sort of more forgiving about, I can teach them sort of detail how to do that stuff later. Finding these people and instilling that attitude in people that I have is a real challenge. So I'm really having tips about looking for inspiration from elsewhere, or I'm sort of looking to stand-up comedians, for instance, things like that, sports psychologists, or any books you've read or films I've seen.
For inspiration, you mean, or for?
Yeah, well, just sort of finding how to instill an attitude as opposed to sort of just the skills. You know what I mean? Which I'm finding sort of tricky.
Anyone else got an answer to that? Let's crowdsource it. Anyone help? I think it's a really interesting question. I'm trying to think of things that, Sarah, as someone who's run account management before, what are the?
Is that what your role is?
Yeah.
So you're trying to hire people?
Well, we're trying to hire at the moment, but what I'm trying to I'm finding it harder to find people who've got that attitude. I'm finding it's quite hard to teach people that.
Yeah.
Just trying to sort of find it innately, but I'm wondering if there are ways in which to instill it in people as opposed to...
Well, I'm quite black and white, as most people who know me will know. I don't think you can instill that in people. I think, you either have those skills inbuilt in, like creative judgment, it's all in there, you can't teach it to people. So don't make distressed purchases. I have made many distressed purchases throughout the years, always regretted it just because there's a role needed filling. And don't hang fire. I have found our best people have come through, whether it's been a formal or informal graduate recruitment scheme, and from all places. So whether they be from, College, some are Oxbridge, and I don't reject the Oxbridge people for that old school, and JWT used to have the best people from Oxford. They tend to be pretty good. But look to Manchester, Poly. That's where I've still found the best talent. I never find it through headhunters because I'm a bit suspicious that if your CV is with a headhunter, it means you're shit. I've never had my CV, I'm sure Laurence has never had his CV. My best people, I'm pretty sure, get called up because somebody's been in a team with them on an IPA course and thought they were fantastic, thought they had brilliant ideas. I think it's really hard. There is a dearth of talent out there, but I think it's not just in our discipline. I'm married to a planner. I know he scratches his head most nights and where are all the good planners, where have they gone? I just think you have to do probably what you're doing, which is look beyond agencies. Really think about who you're bringing. I think bringing young people early. Maybe they haven't got degrees. I know Nicola's championing this at the IPAs, and she's saying, we've all become snobs. They don't necessarily have to have degrees. Why not just hire a brilliant 18-year-old or 16-year-old and get them in? If they have those skills that you're looking for already, I'm sure they'll one day want to run their own agency. So I think it's something we're all struggling with. If I knew the answer, probably wouldn't be telling you anyway. But we struggle with the same thing, don't we, Stephen?
I think, but your so that's the recruitment end. I think your how do we add fizz ideas, they are already good. I've never seen sports psychology applied to an agency, but I know that Kevin Roberts, who runs Saatchi's, is a massive believer in it. Big All Blacks confidant, and I know he often uses those techniques to, well, partly to help sharpen people's team behaviour, but also just to create higher levels of performance. So I know they use it. I know AMV used it to help them get to an answer on Sainsbury's, for example. I can't remember whether it was Pinsent or Redgrave or one of them. And I have used comedy workshops actually, but more to get to answers and insights, because they're very good at doing that, than to make people fizz. But that was an upside as well. So I'd keep. I think your instincts are good in terms of if I've got this group of people, but I want to add attitude, I'd give it a go.
Steve,
My alarm's on.
I don't think this is working. I'm giving
I don't think
this
it's
up.
working, is it?
No.
Talk about the importance of leadership, and I suppose it's all very important for all of us to understand that. And you've got a long list of people you work with, they're brilliant leaders. What, if anything, kind of is a common traits of that sort of group of leaders you've worked with in the cabinet?
Yeah, quite hard actually, because I don't think. I think people do it in very different ways, and I actually think that's quite encouraging for us all, that there isn't one type of leader. So I've seen people do it in a very nurturing, delegatory way. I've seen people absolutely do it in a kind of tyrannical, this is what I think, this is where I don't care what the rest of you think, this is where we're going. So I don't, in a good way, I don't think there is one style of leadership. And I'm looking around the room and looking back at myself, and I'm encouraged by that, because otherwise some of us would just be ruled out temperamentally. But I think in the end, it's people who understand it is their responsibility to lead, or someone's responsibility to lead, and who have a knack, however that's expressed, of getting people to follow them. I mean, I think leadership's quite a tricky notion to get your head around, but I think that test of, are people following me? Do I have followership? Is probably the simplest day-to-day test of whether you're leading rather than just managing. But different. I think it's a good thing that there are different ways of doing it. I don't think you have to morph into someone different. I think you have to be confident. That's probably the one thing that you need. But we can all find confidence in ourselves or be given it from others.